Dean of Humanities and Social Science at CRC. My decision to attend the HBCUs in large part precipitated by a conversation I had with one of my instructors, professors at the undergraduate institution I went to. I expressed my interest in going to graduate school, and she asked me, well, what field of study or area of interest do you have in political science? I'm a political scientist by training, PhD in political science. And I said I was interested in studying Black politics, and she said, well, this is probably not the institution for you. And she encouraged me to seek a graduate program outside of the UC system. And that was somewhat discouraging. At the time, one of my peers was applying to Howard University, and I decided to apply to Howard University. At the time, I didn't know that Howard had one of two PhD granting. I was one of two PhD granting institutions in political science in HBCUs. So there are 105 HBCUs. There are only two institutions that provide a PhD in political science: Clark Atlanta and Howard University. Subsequently, while I was waiting for my financial aid paperwork, I enrolled at CSUS after I graduated to take a few classes, and I met an African American political scientist who was teaching in the government department. And that experience was transformational. I decided to stay at CSUS to earn my MA in government, and when I asked him where should I go, he encouraged me to go to an HBCU. So my trajectory from the UC system, the CSU to HBCUs, is that journey was uneven, but the best decision I ever made in my academic career still is going to do graduate work at HBCUs. It was the most rewarding, inspirational, and really liberatory experience that I've ever had. It was the first time that I felt as though I was fully embraced by the institution, not one singular actor, one singular African American professor who was deeply invested in my success. At that institution, I felt wholly embraced by the institution, the administrative personnel, the faculty, obviously the students, and where it was situated. So it was quite rewarding. I'm very grateful to have had that experience. HBCUs have played a fundamentally transformative role in dismantling barriers to access to higher education for African American students, and to a significant degree, which they don't oftentimes get the credit for, students who are interested in accessing institutional higher education wherever those HBCUs are located. Notwithstanding the fact that obviously the vast majority of students are African Americans, from my experience at HBCUs, teaching at HBCUs, and going to HBCUs, and, as a graduate student, it was one of the most inclusive environments that I've ever been a part of. I haven't been to any HBCU. Even when I was in graduate school, I had non-Black peers in the program. And I remind people that while we think of Blackness as a homogeneous identity, Blackness is really a kaleidoscope, a spectrum. So that, in fact, you have African descendant peoples from all around the world who attend HBCUs, who work at HBCUs, and people have a myriad of identities in addition to their racial and ethnic identities that shape and inform their lived experiences. And all of those things, I think, are what makes HBCUs invaluable. Only 3% of higher education institutions in the country, colleges and universities, are historically Black colleges, but HBCUs play an outsized role in training Black doctors, whether through undergraduate degrees in STEM or in graduate programs, graduating African Americans in STEM, as I mentioned with respect to political science, from like 1996 to 2006, a disproportionate number of African American PhDs in political science came from 2 historically black colleges. So if we're thinking about how we transform, for example, and this is a question that I'm interested in now as a dean, how do we create faculty diversity, particularly at institutions where the vast majority of students are students of color? I think about the role that HBCUs play in training the next generation of African descendant scholars, notwithstanding that they represent a very small proportion of colleges and universities. They oftentimes don't get the credit that they're entitled to, nor the resources that they need. But I have long been a vociferous advocate of the contributions that HBCUs make and how they serve to transform higher education, and in some ways are a model for Black excellence in particular, but diversity and inclusion more broadly. So I think I've been very fortunate to have people who are deeply invested in my success throughout my academic career, who see my commitment to freedom, justice, and equality. The reason why I became a political scientist was to try to understand how the political system operates, how finite resources were distributed, who had access to those resources, and the degree to which those groups who have been historically excluded from the benefits of citizenship and those resources, how that marginalization was maintained through the American political system. That's the only reason I became a political scientist. And that deep interest was really nurtured by people who were committed to my success and who understood that my deep commitment from the time I've been very young. I've had a level of consciousness that people recognize and have been deeply committed to cultivating. But what motivates me every day, and people, sometimes the job is overwhelming, and I think to myself, I could be doing something else, but I get up and do this every day because our students can't wait. African American students can't wait. Students of color cannot wait. One of the things for people in groups who have historically been excluded from the benefits of citizenship and the resources, the attendant resources associated with citizenship, is that they've always been asked to wait. It's not your time. It's not the right time. And so for me, what motivates me now in this position is working towards creating a more inclusive learning environment that benefits the students that we serve because they're entitled to it and because they can't wait. So every generation has been asked to wait. So for me, I represent and try to amplify the voices of people who can't wait. And so that's what motivates me. But I've been very fortunate and very privileged to be a part of a generation of Black feminist scholars and Black women in political science who have had a great deal of mentorship and support by previous generations, and I don't take any of that for granted. And I try to every day come to work and try to share some of the privileges of that deep investment in my success with others around me, the degree to which I can. So it's an interesting question for me, someone who is from a very young age identified as a feminist. I'm talking about from maybe before I was even a teenager. So I've always been deeply committed to the belief that women have a voice and a contribution to make to society. It was something that I've always felt intuitively before I was exposed to bodies of literature that reaffirmed that intuition. But I encourage women to consider that the past, women have played a role in informing, empowering, and transforming societies. The degree to which their role and the ways in which they've done that work have become a part of scholarship and popular discourse has been quite limited, particularly for women of color and Black women in particular. So, if I think about that question, the future is female. I think that the women have, in the past, present, and the future, will play a remarkable role. It may be that we have accessed institutions and spaces of power and authority and have sought to amplify our voices and challenge those in power and authority to make room for us in ways in which they haven't in the past, because we've always been here. I think about Black activist women in the United States from enslavement into the present. Black women have actively been involved in resisting systems of oppression and institutions that perpetuate them since we've been in this country. So if I was in the classroom, I would tell my students that I wouldn't want you to walk away from here thinking that women have not been deeply invested in transforming society. The future, women have been a part of the past, the present, and the future. You have the responsibility to learn that, and sometimes that takes unlearning, right? And relearning and producing new scholarship. But I always encourage folks, if you look for it, you will find it. But oftentimes people don't know to look for it. So beyond the capitalization, the commercialization of the future as female, I encourage students, if I was in the classroom today, to deeply invest in learning your history around women's activism and Black women's activism in particular, because you'll realize the contributions that women have made oftentimes have not either been rendered invisible, or their voices haven't been amplified, but they've always been there. So, but I am encouraged that this generation of women and men as well, because one of the things I've always say with respect to dismantling, whether it be white supremacy or patriarchy, that those who benefit from those forms of oppression have to also be actively involved in dismantling those systems. It is not exclusively women's responsibility or African Americans' responsibility or any other marginalized population's responsibility to be involved in dismantling systems of oppression. I'm encouraged by this generation of students and their intersectional feminism, and the degree to which they have used popular mediums and democratized access to information and to communication through social media. That's inspiring. I'm inspired by this next generation, and they are taking ownership over how we begin to think about women's roles in society. So I'm in the SOC building, room 157. And my number is 916-691-7656.